Welcome into the Vikings Now podcast. I'm your host, Ahmad Hicks, joined alongside Pierre and Noujaim. Welcome. This is your first episode with us.
Putting the headphones on, it feels like I'm back at home after my radio days back in the early part of my career, so I'm thrilled to be here with everybody.
And we're talking Vikings preseason. They just wrapped up their preseason winless. They lost today to the Arizona Cardinals 18-17. Greg Joseph had a chance to win the game with about 2.5 minutes left in regulation, but he missed a field goal. So Kevin O'Connell, enters his second full season as head coach, yet winless in the preseason. Does that matter, though, Pete?
No, it matters not. It never matters. I mean, when you look at the preseason schedule around the league, I think if you're rooting for a specific team and you see your favorite team win 3-0 in the preseason, great, way to go. Hang a banner. Have
Pat on
fun.
the back, huh?
Pop the champagne. Who cares? Because it doesn't matter one iota. What matters is what happens on September 10th, technically September 7th if you want to start the league year where it does with the Chiefs hosting the Lions on September 7th. But for Vikings fans, what they care about is what happens on September 10th when the Tampa Bay Buccaneers come to town and the regular season gets underway.
All right, so before we start talking about the regular season, I want to flashback here to just the preseason. What are your takeaways? What are your thoughts on the final preseason game, specifically in the quarterback room?
Well, yeah, I think that's – you and I were talking about it upstairs when we were watching this game. The story of the final preseason game of the year was Jaren Hall, and he got an opportunity to go wire to wire, and this is a guy who is trying to make the final 53, and his performance today was, I'd say, good, steady for the most part, didn't wow you by any chance. There were a couple throws in there I said wow to, that's for sure. But you pointed out when we were doing the Vikings postgame show that this is a dual quarterbacks league.
Yep.
And Jaren Hall has the ability to make plays with his arm and his feet more so than a guy like Kirk Cousins, who's going to be the starter in 2023. So while I think Jaren Hall did a lot of good things today, if it was me personally making the decisions, I'm not carrying 3 quarterbacks on the roster. I'm going to try to stash one on the practice squad, and that one would be Jaren Hall if I can. I know that would be a tough decision.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'm carrying 3 quarterbacks on my roster.
If you're head coach Kevin O'Connell, GM Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, you don't need to carry 3 quarterbacks, especially when you have Kirko here in Minnesota right now, because as we all saw in that quarterback Netflix documentary, he's not coming out of the game. It does not matter, how hard he gets hit, how many hits he takes throughout the season. But what I did love to see from Jaren Hall today was progress, and it showed that if he develops the right way, Minnesota could, I'm not going to say have the answer or the future of the franchise in their hands, but what they do have is a dual threat quarterback, somebody who can extend plays, can make plays on his own, whether that's with his arm or his legs. GM Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah said earlier this preseason that he wanted to see him show progress in the pocket. So not just drop back and look at your one read and then you're taking off to run. He wanted to see him drop back, elude the rush that's coming to his face, look at your number 1 target. It's not there. Okay, here's number 2, here's number 3. He did that today. So he did show progress. And Jordan Tiamu, who was just signed from the DC Defenders from the XFL, he was supposed to play today. He was supposed to get in the second half, but head coach Kevin O'Connell said after the game, Jaren Hall just did so many things right, and he doesn't get a lot of reps that they could not waste that valuable game-like atmosphere for him. So I think this is a guy who they brought in Jordan Tiamu for a little competition, say, hey, Jaren Hall, your roster spot is not solidified, but after game 3, he definitely solidified that.
There was another way where they could have indicated to Jaren Hall that his roster spot is not solidified, and I know a lot of people were kind of talking about this, talk radio, internet message boards all season long, all training camp long, I should say. And it's just interesting to me that Trey Lance is now a Dallas Cowboy. I know a lot of people in Minnesota wanted to see the hometown kid come back to Minnesota and possibly be the future quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings. Now, I don't know, as of right now, I don't know if Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah made a phone call to inquire about what the price would be to get Trey Lance. The price turned out to be a 4th-round pick going from Dallas to San Francisco. I don't know if that says the price was too steep for Kwesi, and I don't know if it says they have that much confidence in their backup quarterback situation. I don't really know the answer to that just yet. But if I'm a general manager, actually, this is what I'll say. As a casual observer, more than casual, I have to do this for my job, of course. I kind of get paid to do this. I have to take this seriously, and I do from time to time. But as somebody, that has to watch the Vikings on a consistent basis, and has watched the National Football League for a long time, no disrespect to Sam Darnold, but if you cannot beat Sam Darnold out for the backup job, I'm not paying a fourth rounder to get you on my team. You better believe that I'm not going to do that.
You know, I was talking on social media about this, and I think this is the bigger picture with the Trey Lance deal. Do we think Sam Darnold is better than him? No. But is he more expensive than Sam Darnold right now?
Are we sure he's not better than him?
Well, we haven't seen enough. You're basing a small sample size of where he got hurt last year. They were running an offense where he was the running back, essentially, running up the middle. That's how he ultimately got hurt. So you didn't really get a chance to see, no, he's not a good quarterback. He's not going to make it in the NFL.
The 49ers coaches got a chance to see it in practice every day for the last month.
You know, and I can't argue with you on that, but I think, you know, when you talk about a guy who's probably owed roughly $10 million over the next 10 years, all right, why are we paying a third string or a second string quarterback $10 million? You're earning more than our starting quarterback right now. So there's a lot of drama. And then, you know, every time Brock Purdy does bad, then it's like, well, why don't we give Trey Lance, you know, a chance? So I think it's smart, you know, for Kwesi and them. They have so many other glaring needs on this team, and moving forward, Justin Jefferson has to get paid. TJ Hockenson has to get paid. Is Kirk Cousins coming back for another year? And then you still need some other big names on defense because Danielle Hunter only got a one-year deal. So you have a lot of glaring needs, and I don't think spending $10 million on a backup or a project quarterback was worth it this year.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, certainly so, and that's Kwesi's job. He's got to have to look at the landscape of this team, not just in 2023, but moving forward and seeing like where the money is going to go to and where he wants to allocate resources, and I think that's going to be a tough challenge, especially if you don't bring back Kirk Cousins after the 2023 season. Then it becomes a whole, well, we've got money to spend now, but who's going to be our quarterback? And that's you know, say what you want about Kirk Cousins, but, you know, good quarterbacks do not grow on trees. It's supposed to be hard to play this position in this league. So is he? I know that we can have this debate till we're blue in the face.
We sure can.
Is he good enough to get you to a Super Bowl? He's good enough to win you the division title? Is he good enough to get you over the edge? Now, I feel that's an unfair question because this is a team game. And, yes, I do understand that your quarterback needs to step up in big situations in order for you to get to the Super Bowl. I've seen teams with less talented quarterbacks get to the Super Bowl, and not only get to the Super Bowl, but win a Super Bowl with quarterbacks that are less talented than Kirk Cousins. So your situation could be a lot worse than Kirk Cousins at quarterback in the NFL, especially if you look around the landscape of the NFL right now.
Let me just break it down like this. Kirk Cousins, I think, is the 14th highest paid quarterback in the National Football League. So that's not saying a lot right now. You got a lot of guys bringing in like $40+ million a year.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins in the playoff game versus the Giants last year, 31-39, 279 yards, a couple of touchdowns. What more do you want from a starting quarterback in a playoff game? You know, his defense couldn't stop a nosebleed in that game. So do I think Kirk Cousins is a Super Bowl winning quarterback? I think Kirk goes as far as the pieces around him. And I'm not just talking about the pieces on offense. I'm talking about defense. I think everything needs to be perfect because, as we talked about last year, he was sacked the third most in the NFL, and they did not improve that offensive line at all this offseason.
No, the run it back situation pretty much with the offensive line for the Vikings is quite concerning. Now, there's still time between now and the season opener for moves to be made, whether it's by, you know, waiver wire, whether it's by trade. You know, things can still happen. The fact that the preseason is over doesn't mean that the roster, whatever the 53 roster as is right now, is going to be what it is for the rest of the season. So there's still plenty of time for Kwesi to figure that out and for, you know, opinions to be shared on who should be starting on the offensive line and who should be starting in other areas of the field. But as you look into the 2023 season, when I'm looking at this team, my questions are at guard.
Yep. Ed Ingram, Ezra Cleveland.
I know that, you know, with Brian Flores is now at the as the new defensive coordinator, we don't know what that 3-4 scheme is going to look like. Danielle Hunter has been on edge, you know, his entire career. How's he going to do in a 3-4 now that he moves to outside linebacker?
Well, you know, I will speak to that just a little bit based on what I saw at training camp. It's not like Ed Donatell's defense last year, where I'm going to break it down in layman's terms for those football listeners right now. Ed Donatell was asking Danielle Hunter last year to drop and cover your curl flat zone. So that's taking your hand out of the ground and you're dropping 15 yards back and going to the numbers, and you're looking for a wide receiver to come in your zone. What I've seen from Coach Flores and his defense this year, Danielle Hunter is still dropping back a little bit, but that's when you have 7-8 men at the line of scrimmage, and he's dropping back 5 yards, and he's getting the guy that's the slant coming across his face or the drag coming across his face. So he's not being asked to do so much, but still you want to have that versatility as a defensive lineman that says, hey, we know he's going to come, but when he doesn't come, that's when you lead to those easy interceptions and stuff like that. So a lot of creativity for Danielle Hunter. I think he'll have his hand in the ground a lot more, and he'll certainly be getting after the quarterback more this year.
I think one position as well that hasn't been talked about nearly enough for me is defensive tackle. And,
that's a good point.
Khyiris Tonga, slated to be the starter.
He is right now, alongside Harrison Phillips.
A little bit of an unknown, I think, to some people, who maybe casually watch the NFL, who, Khyiris Tonga is not a name that has been, a household name, so to speak. Defensive tackle is an area, too, where like, okay, I mean, if you're the coaching staff and you're confident in him, great, then I will trust you to be confident because you're there at practice every day. You see these guys every day. You know what they're capable of. How do we feel about defensive tackle? I don't know what to feel. I don't know what to feel.
They don't have a lot of depth there. You're going to ask a lot of a guy like Dean Lowry, who was just signed. He had a half sack last year. Harrison Phillips, he's not going to get after the quarterback. But Khyiris Tonga, what you want to see from him is eat up two blockers and don't lose any ground. Yeah. Because he's replacing a Dalvin Tomlinson who was able to go not only stuff the run, but go get the quarterback. So Khyiris Tonga, all you want him to do, use that big frame, hold up the two offensive linemen, don't budge, don't go anywhere. If you see him getting driven back 4 to 5 yards, that means the linebackers and the safeties are having to make a lot more plays. And so the defensive line, a lot of questions entering this season. I think that is the weakest part of the Vikings defense right now.
Defensive tackle?
No, just the defensive line
across
in
the front.
Yes, the defensive line in general. I think they have some playmakers, but they don't have nearly as much depth there as they do as the linebacker positions or defensive backs.
James Lynch, who could have been a rotational piece for this team, he is out for the season with injury, so that's certainly a blow in terms of depth. Like you were talking about depth, certainly an issue at defensive tackle. And like I just mentioned, on the offensive line, on the interior of the offensive line, we're set at tackle.
Yeah,
Christian Darrisaw left. Brian O'Leary, you're going to bed every night knowing you are good at tackle.
Yeah.
The interior of the offensive line, and just moments ago we did the Vikings postgame show, and I said I still believe the Vikings will win the division. Now it sounds like I'm trying to talk myself out of it because, as cliche as it sounds, it is absolutely true to this very day. You played the game. The game is won in the trenches.
It is.
Time and time again, if you want to see why a play didn't develop, why a play went wrong, then you go back and you look at the tape and you look at the guys on either side of the football up front. The game is won in the trenches. I don't have a lot of confidence in the interior of this offensive line. We just mentioned a moment ago, we have a big question mark across the defensive front, especially in a new scheme. So by proxy, when you say those two things out loud,
right,
are the Vikings going to be able to move the football, and are they going to be able to stop teams from moving the football on them, given how the trenches look? But then again, that's not my pay scale.
No, it's not. I think they'll be throwing the ball a lot, so you won't necessarily have to worry too much about the run game. Although Alexander
throw
Madison,
it quick, probably.
You do have to throw it quick. But Alexander Madison was telling me he's hungry. He's ready to prove everybody wrong. Everybody keeps doubting him. Everybody keeps bringing up Cook and his game-changing speed and how Madison doesn't have that. He said, look, I'm tired of talking to the media. He said, I'm ready to just go make plays. He said, I'm ready to prove everybody wrong. So that's a good thing. Now I want to talk to the viewers about the people on the bubble, the good players the Vikings should bring back, or, if they decide not to sign them to the 53-man roster, we may very well see them go to another team, and that may be not a good thing for the Vikings. So I want to start with Jalen Reagor and Tristan Jackson. These are two guys that I think are on the bubble right now for the receiver position. Jalen Reagor set to make, I think, $3 or $4 million this season. Tristan Jackson looking for his big payday. Jalen Reagor has struggled all throughout a training camp with being consistent. Some days he has really, really, really high plays, and then he has low performances. And you're like, can you just string it together? You're a former first-round pick. So I think Tristan Jackson, Jalen Reagor, that's a spot where if one of these guys gets cut, you're probably not going to see him on the practice squad.
Yeah, probably not. And I think when you look at this team right now, how much of a need is wide receiver at this point? You're pretty much set, in a lot of areas at wide receiver. I know there's jobs to be won for the 4th and 5th spot.
Or really the 5th and 6th spot, because Brandon Powell didn't dress out today, so he's right behind Addison, Osborne, and Jefferson. So Powell has that. And then Jalen Naylor also didn't dress out today. He was dinged up this training camp, so he has the 5th spot. So you're talking about one spot between two guys.
Yeah, and we talked about it on the Vikings postgame show after the game. Tristan Jackson had said that, what does he want to do? He wants
to be the gunner. He wants to be on special teams. He wants to show his versatility.
And that's the best way to stick on an NFL roster, especially if you're a young player and you're in a crowded position room, something like that. If you can can play special teams, that's the best way to get yourself on an NFL roster. So when I'm looking at wide receiver, whatever you want to do, to be perfectly honest with you, if it's Tristan Jackson, if it's Brandon Powell, if it's Jalen Reagor, that doesn't matter to me. To me personally, I'm only saying me personally.
Because you have the other guys.
Yeah, it could be any one of those three guys. My concern is in the other areas of the field, like we had just talked about, both sides of the line. I know corner is a position that appears to be filled with young talent, but they've got to go out there and prove it.
I said they have to prove it.
Safety is another, I know we have Harrison Smith and Cam Bynum. I know those two are good. What are we going to get out of Noujaim? What are we going to get out of some of these other guys that are vying for potential safety jobs?
And that's why I say these bubble guys, Jay Ward, Theo Jackson. These are two really, really good football players. As Kevin O'Connell said, they have ranked towards the top in terms of performance during training camp. Well, you got Cam Bynum. You got Harrison Smith. You got Josh Metellus behind them, who's doing everything, mind you, at training camp, playing outside linebacker, playing safety, getting his hand on the ground, and getting after the quarterback. So you have a lot of depth back there in that safety room with Noujaim as well, who was a high-round draft pick. So it's like Theo Jackson. What are we doing right there? That's a really good football player. Jay Ward, really good football player.
And Metellus was a team captain last year, and he's very well respected in that locker room. He's not going anywhere.
No. So the odds of you keeping 6 safeties are really slim.
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely.
So Kwesi and Kevin are going to have an extremely difficult position when it comes to time narrowing down that safety position and picking the 4 best players. Maybe they keep 5. I doubt they keep 6 though.
And I want to reiterate, just because when the Vikings release their final 53-man roster, I want everybody to remember that just because this is the 53-man roster before week 1 doesn't mean it's going to be the same 53-man roster by the time the regular season is over. Heck, it may not be the same 53-man roster, and it probably won't be by the time week 2 rolls around, depending on who gets hurt, depending on maybe who doesn't perform. So I don't think we need to make too big of a thing of the final 53 unless there's a name or two or a position battle that doesn't play out the way we maybe thought it might. But I wouldn't get too worked up over how the final 53 looks, at the end of the preseason schedule.
All right, now before we let you guys go, Pierre, I want to get your thoughts on the Vikings' outlook for the 2023 season. Do you believe they win the NFC North, and do you believe they make the playoffs again this year?
I think that I've been on record saying I think they will repeat as division winners. I'm not going to steer away now, even though now that I think about it, like I just said, the trench play
is crucial.
That is the number one thing I'm going to be looking for with this team beginning in week 1. I might not even watch Kirk Cousins throw a pass this year because I'm going to be looking directly at the interior of that offensive line. And when the Vikings are on defense, I'm looking to see if they can stop the run. So that is where my attention is going to be, is on trench play. I'm nervous about it. I don't feel good about it. Dare I say I wouldn't gamble on it. But
that's a bold statement from
Pierre. At the same time, I do think there is enough here with this team to repeat as division champions, because I am not as bullish on the Lions as other people seem to be. And again, I sound like a broken record. I'm a big believer in what Brian Flores can do with the defense. We have seen he's had a proven track record in this league. When you go all the way back to his days in New England and then the head coach of the Miami Dolphins, you look back and you see what he does with defenses. There is no reason for me not to believe that Brian Flores can't take a group like this in Minnesota and mold them into something. They don't have to be special, but if they can be middle of the pack in total defense, we're talking 15, 16, 17, I think you have something on your hands.
I'm a believer, but you also did not answer the question. Are they going to the playoffs this year?
Yes, they will go to the playoffs because I still believe they will win the division.
All right. Pierre has it. I think they go to the playoffs. I think the North will come down to week 18 when they travel to Detroit.
Wouldn't that be something?
Play a game. I think, the NFL, they have their script already. You know how things go with that. Yeah. I think, both teams are really, really good. But as Pierre alluded to earlier, I think the Lions have the trench work. They have the bodies up front. Penei Sewell, Aiden Hutchinson. They have a lot of big names on their interior offensive line, exterior defensive line. All the everything you want to see from the trenches. So I think they're going to go back and forth. I think, like you mentioned, Brian Flores is going to get these guys game ready. He's going to get this defense from ranking, 31st in the league last year to the top 16 unit this year. And if the Vikings were 10 spots better than they were last year, they make it past the first round of the playoffs. They probably don't beat the 49ers.
Yeah, probably not.
But they make it past, the Giants in that first round. Sure. So I do think that they have a chance to win the North, but we can't answer that until, like Pierre said, until you see how the trench plays and how they stack up.
Do the Lions, and listen, I'm very much a big believer in the NFL that it is a year-to-year thing. Just because, somebody say, oh, man, look at the Lions. They won, what was it, 7 of the last 8 or whatever that number was. Yeah, whatever. Just because they had a hot second half of the season, just like the preseason wins and losses mean nothing, the way you finished last season means absolutely nothing going into 2023. It is meaningless to me. Anybody who is basing their Lions prediction of winning the NFC North on the fact that they got hot at the end of 2022 doesn't deserve to be in sports broadcasting. I'm sorry, you should need to be watching the NFL more and more and time and again. It is a year-to-year league.
Yeah.
What happened in 2022 has no bearing on 2023 unless you have Patrick Mahomes on your team.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It is a year-to-year thing, and I don't buy that as the notion that the Lions will be what everybody says they are going to be. Now, I could be wrong, but I'm willing to see it.
Right.
So the fact that they finished last in total defense last year, again, that may not be the case this year, but that is a reason to perhaps give me a little pause until you prove it to me that you can be better defensively than what you were last year.
And somewhere Jordan Love fans and Justin Fields fans are listening to this like, what about us? Well, we're not going to talk about them until the season gets there because
I like Justin Fields, though, man.
I like Justin Fields, but I think they have a lot more pieces before they're competing for an NFC North crown with the Minnesota Vikings. So that's our preseason edition of Vikings Now. The preseason is over, Pierre. The real fun is about to begin. And just under 2 weeks, the Vikings will be gearing up to play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with their starting quarterback, Baker Mayfield. Before we go, projections, win, loss, how many?
I think for the season?
No, for that game. For that game? Buccaneers.
I definitely think the Vikings win that game. Not only do I think the Vikings win that game, I think they win it by, I'm going to go, let's say 27-17. 27-17.
Baker Mayfield, 17 points? Dang.
Yeah, I'm going to go 27-17. This defense still has a lot to prove, and it's only week 1, and it's not going to be perfect in week 1. So I think Tampa hangs a couple of touchdowns on Minnesota, but I think Minnesota gets the job done. I'm going to go 27-17 Vikings.
Look at Pierre Noujaim giving Coach Flo that bulletin board material already ahead of week 1.
That's fine. Listen, at this point, I should be the guy's PR guy at this point with how much I've been talking about him the last month. I mean, he owes me a lot of money at this point. So.
Oh, my God. That's Pierre Noujaim. I'm Ahmad Hicks. This is Vikings Now. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment, tell us how we can get better so we can cater this to you. You all have a good one as we prepare for the regular season in a couple of weeks.